The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from.
The intellectual truth seeker syndrome is the virus that has found its home in every philosopher's mind. And it is the desire to understand what is actually going on here. Like, why do we exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is this feeling that I'm seeking for something and I cannot really point to always present with me? Why do I feel so alone? And existence feels like this undefinable thing that it seems like only I am really questioning this deeply and other people are just kind of superficially living their life. When I was around 11 to 13 years old, it really started for me. And I thought that if I could just figure out what is true about the nature of existence and the nature of reality, then everything would be fine. And the more I cared about what is actually true, the more I got frustrated with myself and existence as a whole. And it felt like existence is probably bad because what truths I could find were disturbing. It was very disturbing to realize how much suffering has built our entire society and how it's kind of like an inevitable part of life. And it seems like I needed to find a way to justify that suffering, because if I cannot justify it, if I cannot equalize the balance, then it must mean that this world is actually kind of like a trap or a hellscape, and we need to escape that trap. And then all philosophy really tries to recalibrate the balance within your own mind so you can accept reality and say that reality is okay. And this then kind of gets put into the background of your mind. And the pursuit of truth is the hope that when you find this truth, the balance will get recalibrated. Sadly, through more and more truth seeking, it seems like you see more and more of the suffering and the balance starts to become more and more uneven the deeper and deeper you seek. And the deeper you seek, the less hopeful things become, and the more hopeless you start to feel. And then your entire interest towards truth and philosophy feels more like a burden than anything like noble or desirable. Like the ability to self-reflect on this level is now a curse. And you kind of wish you could just be stupid and not think in these like very existential philosophical terms. And I would call this a syndrome. It is like a sickness and the kind of illness of the mind. It is not about truth. It's about suffering. And truth is both the mask that it wears, but it's also the solution. And this is what makes it so extremely frustrating, because the truth actually has the quality of justice. It does balance the balance sheet. But before people get there, they usually give up and they become nihilistic. So instead of accepting all of the truthful things they feel are very horrible and unacceptable, people are just in denial about the entire thing. And we pretend through nihilism that nothing actually matters. And since nothing actually matters, we can just let the world rot, and it would be preferable that the entire world would be destroyed. And yeah, I can just disengage and pretend that none of it is actually happening because nothing matters. And it is a coping mechanism. You're coping with how much things actually matter and how much things matter just to you. Because if you then make the calculation and say, wait, there's a mountain, a galaxy of suffering inside of me. I have suffered so much in my life, you wouldn't believe. And now you're telling me that there are 8 billion other people in this planet right now. And this is just right now. And there are even more in the past. And then there's also animal suffering. And wait a moment, this is just one planet in the galaxy. The galaxy is how big again? What if there are different universes? And you immediately have an equation where suffering is infinite. And it seems impossible to balance. You just went off the charts and it seems impossible to balance. Now, if then somebody comes who tells you that they found the truth and that the truth exists and it is real and you can actually have access to it and it will give you existential peace, then most intellectual truth seekers, especially those who have not gained insight into the heart or the nervous system or just spiritual esoteric stuff, then this sounds like the biggest scam ever, because there's no hope. and clearly the world is bad. And if you're trying to tell me that it isn't, then you just don't see what I see. And this feeling is so visceral that most people cannot kind of look beyond that, for all good reasons, right? Because what you've seen is too extreme. Now, the kind of issue with this entire way of thinking is that it doesn't really matter how much suffering is out there and how you think about it and how you're trying to balance the sheet and how you kind of want it to be just in your own terms. Because no matter what you think, what you see is true. The suffering that you're witnessing and the potential of it, or the reality of it, and the infinite immensity of it is true. You're already seeing the truth, at least a part of it. And trying to balance the sheet and justifying existence won't change any of it. The only thing that is going to change is how your mind thinks about it, how you're configuring yourself within it. But reality is going to stay the same. You're not going to change it. Even if you were to destroy this planet, it's very, very likely that the conditions that gave rise to our current circumstances will give rise to these circumstances again, either somewhere else or just very close to our galaxy, who knows. So what you're really trying to do is fighting yourself and winning that fight. But how could you win that fight if you're fighting against yourself? You are in denial because you cannot accept something that is clearly true. It's not that you're looking for the truth. It's that you already have seen the truth and now you're trying to justify it and accept it. And it's this acceptance that you can't do. And therefore you use all the philosophy in order to, save yourself from yourself. But if you're honest with yourself, then everything is what it is. And there's nothing to do about it, at least not in the grand scheme of things. It's not that you don't have an impact. It's not that you cannot change things. But right now, things are how they are. This is the truth. And it will always be the truth. And the mind layers all these different belief systems and resistances on top of this. So I'm not just saying, well, it is what it is, and cower in your suffering. Bad luck. You got the truth seeker syndrome, and you are now destroying your life. No, there is an actual solution, but you'll never will find it by balancing the philosophical sheet in your mind. The intellectual truth seeker syndrome has the main problem that it always stays in its head. The syndrome is your head building endless amount of complexes in order to avoid what is actually going on beneath. And what you'll then find is that all your philosophy, all your belief systems, your entire way of thinking is just really a personal matter. It has nothing to do with the existential nature of the world or how much suffering there is. I mean, this is also true, but what is really mattering here is how you have lived your life to this point. What have been the triggers in your life that have caused you to be so hyper-focused on all the negative stuff? What have been the reasons for why you feel like your own experience isn't good enough or that you aren't good enough? And what is your environment telling you about things you're missing, things that are in chaos that you'd wish were more orderly? I know that there are some people who want to use spiritual insight and existential insight to not fix their life. And then they wonder why they feel so miserable all the time when they are literally living miserably. No philosophy is going to change that. And I know sometimes the mind hijacks the mind or hijacks your own patterns, in that you kind of believe that you are doomed to live this way. And then you feel like you are trapped in this existence, and you again externalize it because you haven't chosen to live in the first place. And therefore it's something that has been done to you, which is a very great way to move away from all sense of like power. You are robbing a sense of power completely by just saying that the universe is deterministic and everything has happened to you. And in a way, you are like the victim of the universe. But if you are the victim of the universe, then literally every single atom is. And anything that could even be conceived as freedom is impossible because it didn't choose to be there. So everything is kind of like this eternal trap. And this framing is also logically coherent. That's the issue with the intellectual truth seekers. You can build any sort of framework and make it logically coherent. This doesn't mean it's the ultimate truth. It's just a limited lens that you have constructed and you're now clinging to as a sort of kind of safety mechanism. Although it feels probably kind of miserable, at least it is where you have come to after all this thinking. But what if all this thinking was completely a waste of time? Or more so, it actually caused the issue that you're in the first place. So I would say that if you can't find an answer, maybe you need to dissolve the question. Having sincere dialogues with people and understanding how different minds construct reality is very valuable to gain a deeper understanding of how diverse existence really is. And if you were in the state of a spider instead of a human, imagine how foreign all this intellectualizing must be. Our moral disgust or frustration with the infinite universe, even the concept of an infinite universe, is absolutely non-existent for a spider. They have a very simple life. And I would guess they're probably more content than the average human, but that's me inferring. I don't actually know. But can you see how skewed you are by your own perspective? And that no matter how much you want to find out what is true, you will never find it if you are letting yourself be consumed by your own perspective. Even if you see the amount of suffering clearly, it is also kind of, a burden that you have put on yourself. Because nobody told you to look at infinite suffering all the time. It's not something that you actually have to engage with. You can acknowledge it's there, but obsessive rumination of the infinite is really just lack of acceptance of yourself. There's a place that you can find that is the same world that you are inhabiting right now, but instead of seeing infinite suffering, you do see infinite beauty. You see infinite potential and infinite power, infinite freedom to create the world that you want to see, internally for yourself, for your own existence, and externally to create, who knows, maybe a utopia, something that is really lasting and can change the trajectory of the human race. And it's not something that you have to carry on your own. Maybe you just do a little bit, but it does compound. And the world that we're living in right now, as awful it might seem for most people, we have made big progress. And things are better in a lot of ways that we are just not paying attention to anymore because we're overfixated on the bad. In my Substack, there's a survey that you can fill to apply for my upcoming private community. There, I want to have meaningful conversations with people and change how our current mind and culture is structuring itself. You can find the link in the description. If there's one thing that really, really shifted my perspective over all of this kind of existential rumination, then I must admit it definitely were psychedelic substances. And this really isn't a recommendation at all, as they cost me both the ability to see that what I thought was horrible suffering can go way worse, but then also that true bliss and infinite love is also part of the equation. And you don't just find it through substances, you can find it through deep contemplation, meditation, some shamanic practices, and just falling in love with a person, having a child, seeing some beauty in the world, and then instead of focusing so much on the suffering, noticing that even a cloud can have a beauty to it. Once you kind of lose the grip of your own ego filter, everything shines with the same beauty. And then all of a sudden, the thing that seemed impossible to balance falls into question. Now, all of a sudden, very simple things start to shine with an immense beauty, where you have to wonder what truly is out there that could balance the amount of suffering out there. Like, what if there is truly something that the universe is building towards that will make all of the suffering seem like a giant joke? And as hard as it is to imagine from a perspective of suffering, in the same way, from the perspective of bliss and love and immense well-being, suffering can also start to become this weird, distant, faint memory that almost doesn't seem real at all anymore.